When we experience pain, the first instinct of the human mind is to search for randomness. We ask ourselves, asterisk, why now? Why me? Why this specific trial? Asterisk, and those questions are natural, deeply human. But one of the most transformative shifts a believer can make is to move away from the assumption that pain is chaotic or accidental. In Islam, pain is never random. It is intentional, measured, and placed with divine precision by Allah, who knows the inner architecture of every soul far better than the soul knows itself. The Quran reminds us that Allah does not burden a soul beyond what it can bear. This verse is often quoted but rarely reflected upon deeply. It does not merely mean that we will somehow survive our hardships. It means that every trial is calibrated to our unique capacity. Two people may face outwardly similar pain, yet its weight, meaning, and impact are entirely different. Allah tailors trials the way a skilled physician prescribes medicine, not based on guesswork, but on exact knowledge. What feels overwhelming to us is never excessive in the sight of the one who designed our emotional, psychological, and spiritual limits. This is where pain becomes deeply personal rather than arbitrary. Allah knows which pressure will awaken sincerity in one heart and which will soften arrogance in another. He knows which form of loss will detach us from false dependencies, and which fear will push us toward genuine reliance upon Him. From our limited vantage point, pain feels like disruption. From the divine perspective, it is alignment. It is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to correct a trajectory you could not see while things were comfortable. Psychologically, human beings grow resistant to change when life is easy. Comfort creates inertia. We delay reflection, repentance, and realignment because nothing is forcing us to stop. Pain interrupts that inertia. It slows us down, confronts us, and forces us to ask questions we have been avoiding. And this interruption is not cruelty, it is mercy disguised as severity. Allah shakes us not to make us fall, but to wake us up before we drift too far from what truly matters. There is also a profound humility embedded in this understanding. When pain is seen as random, it breeds resentment. When it is seen as intentional but unjust, it breeds anger. But when it is seen as intentional and wise, it breeds surrender, not passive surrender, but conscious, dignified acceptance. This acceptance does not erase grief or tears. Even the prophets wept. What it removes is the bitterness that corrodes the soul when suffering is interpreted as meaningless. It is important to remember that divine measurement does not mean divine indifference. Allah is not distant from your pain, He is fully aware of it. Every tear is seen, every silent DU letter to B, F A Macron letter to B is heard, every moment of patience is recorded. The trial may be firm, but the one who sent it is gentle. The hardship may feel heavy, but it arrives with an expiration date. Relief written into it, even if you cannot yet perceive where or how that relief will come. So, when pain enters your life, resist the urge to label it as punishment or chaos. Instead, ask a deeper question, asterisk, what is this pain trying to realign within me? Asterisk, because the moment you recognize that your suffering is measured, intentional, and known by Allah, it loses its power to break you. It begins to shape you. And perhaps the most powerful realization is this: the pain you are carrying right now was trusted to you specifically not because you are weak, but because Allah knows there is something within you worth refining. One of the most uncomfortable truths about pain is that it exposes realities we would rather keep hidden. Comfort has a way of allowing illusions to survive. When life is stable, relationships intact, and plans moving forward, We often assume that our foundations are stronger than they really are. Pain arrives and removes that illusion. It does not ask permission. It strips life down to what remains when everything else is taken away, and what remains tells us far more about ourselves than years of ease ever could. When hardship enters, the first things to collapse are our false sources of security. People we assumed would always stand by us disappear. Systems we trusted fail us. Even our own strength, which we quietly admired, suddenly feels insufficient. And this collapse can feel humiliating, but in reality it is clarifying. Pain reveals where our hearts were truly anchored. Were we relying on Allah or merely mentioning His name while leaning on everything else? Psychologically, pain functions like a mirror. It reflects back our priorities, our coping mechanisms, and our emotional dependencies. In moments of ease, we often confuse routine with faith and habit with conviction. We pray because it is scheduled, not because it is necessary. We make DU letter 2B F Macron letter 2B casually, not desperately. Pain changes that. It removes the luxury of spiritual autopilot. Suddenly, the heart speaks with honesty, not polish. The DU letter 2B F Macron letter 2B becomes raw, unfiltered, and sincere, not because we became better overnight, but because pretense no longer works. Pain also reveals the quality of our patience. Many people believe they are patient because they have never been tested deeply. But patience is not proven in theory. It is revealed under pressure. When expectations collapse and answers delay, what emerges is the truth of our relationship with Allah. Do we become bitter, entitled, and resentful, or do we wrestle, question, and still cling to Him? The Quran never condemns the believer for asking why. In pain, it warns against turning away when the answer does not come immediately. There is a philosophical depth here that is worth reflecting upon. Human beings crave control. We plan, predict, and structure our lives around the belief that effort guarantees outcome. Pain dismantles that belief. It reminds us that control was always an illusion, temporarily tolerated by Allah for our growth. When that illusion shatters, the ego is wounded, but the soul is freed. For the first time, a person may realize that surrender is not weakness, it is clarity. It is the recognition that true stability was never in our grasp, but always in Allah's. Pain also refines empathy. A heart that has never broken struggles to truly understand another's suffering. Trials carve emotional depth into the believer, allowing them to feel with others rather than merely speak to them. This is why some of the most compassionate souls are those who have endured silent struggles. Their pain has educated them in ways no book or lecture ever could. Perhaps the most sobering truth pain reveals is this: it shows us what we cannot live without. When everything else is stripped away, success, validation, certainty, what do we reach for instinctively? That instinct is the truth of our faith. Pain does not create belief or disbelief. It exposes what was already there, buried beneath comfort. If we are willing to listen, pain becomes a teacher rather than an enemy. It tells us where our foundations were weak, where our hearts were distracted, and where Allah is calling us to return with sincerity. And once you allow pain to reveal rather than merely hurt, you begin to realize that what it took from you was never as important as what it showed you. After pain exposes our illusions and strips away our false dependencies, something subtle yet profound begins to happen. The heart, now emptied of its usual anchors, starts searching for something more stable. And this is where many people misunderstand the role of pain in the spiritual life. They assume pain is merely something to endure until relief arrives, but in reality, pain often functions as a language, a means through which Allah draws the servant closer when comfort could not. Human beings are remarkably skilled at ignoring gentle reminders. When life flows smoothly, spiritual signals are easy to dismiss. A missed prayer feels insignificant. A distracted DU letter to BF, a Macron letter to B seems harmless, but pain sharpens awareness. It speaks in a tone that cannot be ignored. It forces the heart to slow down, to listen, and to confront questions that were previously drowned out by noise and routine. In this sense, pain is not always a response to wrongdoing. Often, it is an invitation to deeper awareness and sincerity. One of the most striking shifts pain produces is in the quality of our connection with Allah. In ease, worship can become performative, correct in form, but distant in spirit. In pain, that distance collapses. DU letter to B, F, A Macron letter to B is no longer recited, it is cried. The tongue may stumble over words, but the heart speaks fluently. This is why some of the most sincere moments of faith are born not in mosques or lectures, but in hospital rooms, empty homes, and silent nights. Pain creates a space where the believer meets Allah without filters. From a psychological perspective, pain narrows attention. When suffering intensifies, the mind instinctively prioritizes what feels essential. This is why, in moments of deep distress, people do not turn to philosophy or abstraction, they turn to meaning. Allah becomes not an idea, but a necessity. Tawakkul shifts from a concept to an experience. You are no longer trusting Allah because it sounds correct. You are trusting Him because there is nowhere else to place your heart. There is also a mercy hidden in how pain softens arrogance. Comfort often reinforces the illusion of self-sufficiency. Pain dismantles that illusion gently but firmly. It reminds us that strength was never autonomous, that control was never permanent, and that reliance upon Allah was always the truest form of security. This humility is not degrading, it is liberating. The believer no longer carries the exhausting burden of pretending to be in control. Instead, they rest in the knowledge that they are held by one who never loses control. Pain also deepens the believer's spiritual vocabulary. Concepts like sabr, shukr, and RI letter 1 E0D A Macron letter 2B move from theory into lived reality. Patience becomes endurance with dignity. Gratitude becomes recognition of small mercies within difficulty. Contentment becomes trusting Allah even when understanding is absent. These are not virtues learned in comfort, they are cultivated in closeness, and closeness often arrives through pain. Importantly, drawing closer to Allah through pain does not mean the pain instantly disappears. The trial may remain, the difficulty may persist, but the loneliness within it fades. The believer realizes that they are not walking through the hardship alone, and that realization changes everything. The weight of suffering shifts when it is shared with Allah, when every breath becomes an act of reliance and every moment an opportunity for connection. So if pain has driven you to make DU letter 2BF a Macron letter 2B you never made before, to seek Allah in ways you never did before, then understand this. The pain was not sent to push you away. It was sent to bring you back closer, softer, and more aware than you were before. As pain draws a person closer to Allah, something deeper begins to unfold: transformation. This is perhaps the most difficult truth to accept while suffering is still fresh. Pain is not only something you pass through, it is something that shapes who you become. Allah does not waste hardship. Every trial carries within it the potential to refine the believer into a version of themselves that comfort could never produce. Human character is not forged in ease. Ease reveals preferences. Difficulty reveals principles. When everything is going well, it is easy to be patient, kind, and faithful. But pain introduces friction, and friction exposes what is truly embedded within the soul. This is why trials are so powerful in shaping moral and spiritual depth. They force a person to choose repeatedly between resentment and restraint, despair and hope, collapse and endurance. And it is through these repeated choices that character is formed. Psychologically, pain expands emotional capacity. It stretches the heart in ways that are uncomfortable but necessary. A person who has never endured loss often struggles to fully understand grief. A person who has never felt helpless finds it difficult to empathize with vulnerability. Pain opens emotional space. It makes the heart more perceptive, more sensitive, and more aware of the fragility shared by all human beings. This is why those who have suffered deeply often speak with a quiet wisdom. They have been educated by experience, not theory. Pain also cultivates resilience, not the shallow idea of simply getting over it, but the deeper strength of learning how to carry weight without being crushed by it. Resilience in the Islamic sense is tied to sabr, which is not passive waiting, but active endurance with trust. It is the ability to continue praying while hurting, to continue doing good while confused, and to continue trusting Allah while answers remain delayed. This kind of strength does not appear suddenly. It is built gradually through sustained exposure to difficulty coupled with reliance upon Allah. There is also a future-oriented wisdom in pain that we often overlook. Allah prepares people for responsibilities they cannot yet imagine. The patience developed through illness may later allow a person to support others through their suffering. The loneliness endured in one season may later create the emotional depth needed to lead, teach, or guide with sincerity. Many of the most impactful believers were shaped quietly, privately, through trials that no one applauded. Their pain became the unseen foundation of their strength. Philosophically, this reframes the question from "why is this happening to me?" to "who am I becoming through this?" Pain ceases to be an interruption of life and becomes part of its construction. The believer begins to see hardship not as a detour, but as a road, difficult, narrow, and demanding, but purposeful. And when viewed this way, pain no longer defines a person by what they lost, but by what they gained in clarity, depth, and strength. Importantly, transformation does not mean the pain vanishes from memory. Scars remain, but scars are not signs of failure, they are evidence of healing. They remind the believer not only of what they endured, but of how Allah carried them through moments they once believed would break them. Over time, the pain that once felt unbearable becomes a reference point, a reminder of resilience, of growth, and of divine support. And so, when you find yourself in the midst of hardship, remember this: the trial is not merely testing your patience, it is shaping your future. What feels like breaking may in fact be becoming, because in the hands of Allah, pain is never wasted, it is transformed into the very strength you will one day thank Him for.